today. It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to have so many wonderful educators here in one place. My name is Alfredo Mathew. I'm the founder of Working World LLC and the Future of Our Work podcast. This episode is a collaboration with CoBiz Richmond. It's a community forum series where we're looking to elevate entrepreneurs, education, workforce, folks who are really trying to move the equity needle. And we're trying to bring people together for really relevant conversation and dialogue. The objective of these conversations is really to hear from people who are doing real work and what your struggles are, what are the resources that you need, what are the best practices that you're developing, and how can people lean in and show up and help out. So an objective today is to kind of share resources, learn from one another, and see if we can find ways to support the good work that you're all doing. And it's just, it's really important that in these challenging times, we build we stay informed and we build connections, because it can feel really isolating out here. So we're gonna do a quick wrap around, and I'm gonna have my colleague Wesley introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wesley Alexander. I'm the CEO for CoBiz Richmond, working in partnership with Alfredo to really bring these conversations to the forefront, where we get a chance to learn from those who are actually touching the issues that are impacting all of us, with the intent for us to learn as well as figure out how can we implement things in our daily activities that can allow us to support them as well as have impact and potentially improve outcomes for the stakeholders, especially young people. So really grateful to have you guys here, and we're looking forward to a dynamic conversation, and we encourage any of the attendees to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to share those questions with the panelists. So thank you all.
Let's just whip around. Xavier, if you want to share first.
Sure, just start with introduction, sure.
Yeah.
My name is Xavier Nazario. I work for the Bay Area Community College System. My role is Regional Director for Employer Engagement. And essentially, there's 28 community colleges in the Bay Area, and I specifically work with business and entrepreneurship faculty. That looks like curriculum, helping with curriculum development and curriculum research, supporting them with their needs. And then I also do workforce development, connecting colleges to industry, and also help with enrollment management. So in a nutshell, that's my role within the community college system.
But can you also share, but you also have a background in distance learning, do you not?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So there's a couple things. I used to teach in the classroom in the business department at Santa Rosa Junior College. Unfortunately, with this role, I'm not allowed to teach currently because it's a conflict of interest, but I have a keen desire to continue learning when it comes to instructional design and technology. So I am a facilitator for a group that's called, it's a course called Effective Teaching Practices, and it's sponsored by AQ, Association for College and University Educators, and it's kind of kept me connected to faculty. I have a group of 20 faculty that I facilitate and mentor that are from the junior college, Santa Rosa Junior College.
Cool. And Mikey Lamb.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Alba Lamb, and I'm an English teacher at a Bronx high school called Mott Haven Village Preparatory High School, where Alfredo and I began the school back in 2002 as one of the 5 founding teachers of that small school, as all the big schools were being broken into small schools at that time. And I'm excited to be on this call. I was really excited to hear that another teacher is here from Anna Yates Elementary School. Tiffany Johnson. I went to Cal, and the first thing I did when I graduated was I got a job teaching 5th grade for Principal Ramona Bishop at Anna Yates Elementary School.
What a small world.
There you go. All right, you all will have much to discuss. We also have with us Mr. Rodney Pierre-Antoine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Executive Director of a small little network of Catholic schools in the Oakland Diocese in the Bay Area here. Alfredo is a member on our board of directors, and you know, we're in the process of trying to continue our focus on faith, community, and academic excellence in this remote learning landscape we now find ourselves in. So it's been great to take these 7 schools and help them make instructional pivots while still focusing on those three core tenets of faith, community, and academic excellence.
And Miss Tiffany Johnson.
I don't have much to say. I teach 4th grade at Annie Yates Elementary. I am getting my feet wet, really wet, with this whole distance learning thing, and trying to make it happen and help a lot of teachers who are finding themselves very overwhelmed. So I'm here to try to figure it out.
Yes. And I spoke with Tiffany earlier this week. She has a lot to say. She's just very modest. But we're going to kick this off. If folks can just put themselves on mute, and I'll just kind of move around the who's going to talk here. But we want to start off with, what is the current challenge you're facing as educators? How did this initial response to the shift, how has the initial response to remote learning been for you, your students, and your school community? And we're going to start with Mike Lamb in the South Bronx. This morning, I had the privilege to sit in on a virtual town hall that Mike did with his students and alumni, some of which I taught. And the Bronx is at the epicenter of this pandemic. A lot of our former students are in the healthcare field at Mount Sinai, at White Plains Hospital. They're on the front lines fighting this thing. You all are facing not just, all right, this big upheaval shift in learning, but you're fighting, right? Many folks are fighting for their lives, and families are truly, truly impacted. So what has this shift been like for you? What's your current challenge, Mike?
Well, that was a very powerful experience that we just went through with what I called Still a Village, with our school being named Mott Haven Village Preparatory High School. I wanted to call and get in touch with a number of alumni to try to come together to think outside of the box and present something different to our students that could build community. I would say the main challenge to distance learning so far has been, from the beginning, when it started a few weeks ago, just students dropping off the map. And, you know, we started with a schedule that tried to follow the typical our bell schedule in a way where we had planned like 20-minute video chats, essentially, along our original bell schedule. Oh, I have my 8:45 second period class. That's going to be a 20-minute video chat. Sometimes it would go a little longer. And then the kids were expected to go on to their next video chat. But there was a lot of pushback from the union on that type of a schedule, with everyone agreeing that we should not try to recreate the typical school day in these circumstances and shift to a different type of a schedule to where you would basically be expected to host a video chat for your class just once a week now, where you have Monday is math day and Tuesday is science day, Wednesday social studies, Thursday English. So now I host a video chat every Thursday for my English class, and the other days I post questions, assignments, links to videos, etc., to try to have the kids engage with those materials on days when we don't have a video chat. But whether it's the typical bell schedule or the new schedule, either way, pretty much the same kids are logging in. It's those kids who are remaining engaged, and the majority of Mott Haven Village students, there's about 300 of them. And we already had plenty of problems with engagement pre-pandemic. And the pandemic, as it has with so many things as simply, as I think Dr. Fauci said at one point, shone a bright light on social problems that already existed. And so our main challenge is kids dropping off the map, not being engaged, not logging in with their classes at all, and trying to figure out a way to catch those kids in some kind of a net that will hold them and bring them back into our school. Essentially, I would say that my attendance, it started out, I would say maybe a high in the first week or two, maybe a high was maybe about 38 kids out of my around 80 students. And now, it's typically around 25 of those 80 students who I interact with through remote learning. So we already had plenty of problems of long-term absences and things like that, and kids being disengaged from school. As we know, throughout America, fighting the achievement gap, we already were dealing with many problems of disengagement, and those problems have heightened under the current circumstances.
Thanks for sharing, Mike. Tiffany, you teach a younger group, 4th grade. What are you experiencing here in the Bay Area?
Well, so just so you have a little background, some people get Emeryville confused with Pixar and entitlement. We don't have that. Most of our students are from Oakland Unified. We're historically, we've been at inter-district transfer school. So a city who accepts students from everywhere. And we have students coming from as far as Antioch, Vallejo, to come to our school because their parents maybe work in the area, things of that nature. So 70% of our students are over 70% are considered low income. And we have really fought the fight to try to get devices in the hands of our students who don't have them. There have been surveys that have gone out from the district. Prior to that, like answering the call right away, many of the teachers prepped over that weekend once we found out that this was happening, and they just used the entire weekend to try to connect with families. And I think at the elementary level, what's most important is making sure that families have what they need. That's the first response. You cannot think about academics. You can't think about anything else other than, where is the child going to be? What do you need? And once we started to respond to that, then you could start thinking about the rest. In terms of my class specifically, I happen to be teaching a class this year who over the past 3 years, they've had at least one teacher in their cohort leave by before the first trimester was over. And so, for instance, one student I have for 3 years in a row, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, has received a new teacher or substitute teachers throughout the school year. And so that type of turnover, I knew what I was expecting. I knew what to expect when my students came into the door. We're going to have to do a lot of work. So I created a website for them. Now, mind you, I'd never created a website or even thought about creating a website before. Most teachers that I am in contact with, we're pretty old school, and especially elementary, the hands-on learning is so important. And so the tech side is kind of like, yeah, we'll get there. Even today in 2020, we're like, yeah, it's there, but it's not that important. However, this year I wanted to give the parents as much as I could, so I created this website of resources, and I call it Miss Johnson's Desk. And so they can go there, and if they're stuck in language arts, if they're stuck in math, science, whatever, they can go and they can click on a tab and find some sort of resource to help them. Now, because I anticipated this happening, I was able to speak to my students before they left that Thursday, the last day that I saw them. and I created an emergency plan. Most of my students were able to access that emergency plan right away. I had about 8 students that I had to really, really work to get in contact with for 2 weeks. And I have finally made contact with every family. Mind you, like I received a new student 2 days before this all happened. So that was one of the students that I was really trying to make sure got on board. Now I have about 3 students that I need to get devices to. That being said, it's all about how you respond, what you're thinking about, what's important. And mind you, I'm trying to make sure that parents understand that the stress is not on them. I don't want them stressing about how to do, what to do. Oh my gosh, I have to be Miss Johnson. A lot of them, I mean, I've had parents in tears, and I'm like, I know you're overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for the students to continue to go towards their learning goals and not stress out the families. So on the elementary side, that's pretty much what my goal has been, is create a structure where they can access the learning. The kids can continue to progress and chip away at their standards, whatever it is, going towards that next level, but not stress out the families. So I have many parents that don't even speak English. So it's like, how do you say, I need you to do this? I can't demand that. It's not fair. So that's where I'm at with this.
Tiffany, how many families do you have? How many students in your classroom?
28.
28.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So 80 students for Mike, 28 for Miss Tiffany. And Rodney, you have 7 schools.
About 1,200 kids.
About 1,200 kids.
Yeah.
Now, I think Lumen Christi Academies, you put something in place earlier this year that made this transition a little easier, and you're not a traditional public school. Share with us a little bit about how you've been able to make this transition.
Sure. I'm going to start off though by connecting something that Tiffany said about she's just trying to figure it out, right? I think the beauty of this whole process is we're all just trying to figure it out, right? So much research has been done on the power of growth mindset. And, different people can be defensive about what they know or what they've done or what's going to be effective or not, and can become resistant to embracing change and embracing new strategies. Well, this pandemic has forced everyone to start with a learning curve because none of us have ever done this before. And it's created a space for us to embrace fail forwards. It's created us a space to embrace the iterative process. I think that there's a sense of hope there. To your point, Alfredo, we had made as a network a shift to leveraging blended learning as a pathway to personalizing the learning experience for our students. And this was our first year having a lot of professional development every month with it. The ironic thing is when we made the shift, kind of like Tiffany, we knew probably about a week and a half, I was trying to tell our principals, hey, prepare for this potential reality. As we shifted, Monday, our last day of on-campus school was on a Monday, March 16th. On Tuesday, March 17th, we transitioned to remote learning. And the teachers and principals who had the smoothest transition were those who had embraced the blended learning shifts already. So they were the ones who were utilizing some of the adaptive software. They were the ones who were already kind of allowing teacher or students to have a little bit more autonomy in the learning process. And they were the ones that had embraced this whole notion of classroom community and prioritizing space for community. So when we shifted to the remote learning model, where we had to emphasize leveraging technology, they made that quick pivot. But the positive thing is those teachers who were hesitant, those teachers who were a little reluctant, who may not have been fully present at some of these PD sessions, started emailing our facilitators saying, hey, can you show me how to do this and work out Google Classroom? because when you did the Google Classroom training, I didn't quite get it. And so we've now started to do these things called Appy Hours, which is trainings, retraining our teachers on how to leverage the tools that they already have available, while all the while focusing on this notion of community and connectedness, knowing that our kids are are experiencing trauma, even the trauma of watching the news, right? And seeing, you know, the numbers kind of climb. Like, you know, I feel for Michael and brothers and sisters in New York. You're living it, but all of our kids are watching it, you know, day to day. And there's that, you know, second or third degree trauma that they're experiencing. So we're trying to provide intentional space for teachers to connect with kids. I'll close with this. We've been doing surveys of the kids, and we got 1,200 kids. About 700 of them have responded to the first set of surveys. And when we asked them, what is helping you learn? The number one, 90.9% of the respondents said classroom meetings. That was the top thing. We do synchronous lessons, we do asynchronous lessons, we do projects, we do all sorts of things. But the number one thing that they rated was the classroom meetings, the live, daily, virtual classroom meetings that they have that give them a sense of connectedness and normalcy, and you know, kind of help them navigate through this just pandemic, you know. So I'll stop there.
Xavier, you're not on the front lines. You're not a teacher right now, but you have a view of community colleges across the Bay Area. Yeah. What are you seeing happening with this shift?
So I have more of a regional perspective on this, and I would say, and I'll tailor this to just business and entrepreneurship faculty. And that's a discipline that typically is ahead of the curve when it comes to adopting technology. But most of our faculty are asked to completely change the way that they're used to teaching. And so they're asked to shift their teaching style, learn new tools on the fly, teach things in an optional way, and be patient yet compassionate, deal with things like daycare, sick loved ones, family members getting laid off, having two people work in a household but have a really small house. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir right now. You guys all know the challenges. And the thing that's happening in this specific pandemic is the students have it harder than the teachers. Like our faculty are blessed to just have a job and be able to have the comfort of their home, to be able to have this learning curve. But our students are the ones that are laid off and the ones that are still trying to take classes, and they have a kid at home, and they may be taking care of a loved one, or they may be missing their parents or their elders. So it has been challenging for faculty to make that pivot. However, similar to what Rodney said, it's a forced change. So with any forced change, there's people who take advantage of it, and then there's those who resist. And I'm proud to be part of a community college system that's very affordable. We have one of the best community college systems in the world. It has the most students out of any in the world, and our chancellor's office and our deans and our presidents, they're all doing their best to quickly shift and adjust so that we can meet the needs of the students, whether that's getting them food by keeping the food banks open, getting them computers, getting them money to buy whatever they need. I mean, there are initiatives happening across the board that are really exciting, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those later on in the call.
Excellent. I want to applaud everyone for your response, from Ms. Johnson with your Ms. Johnson's desk to Michael in regard to seeing that the bell schedule wasn't maybe the most effective way to respond, and trying to test out different ways to create a schedule and create some normalcy. To Rodney mentioning the blended learning and how the Archdiocese is responding to the needs of the students and the faculty, all the way to Xavier talking about the challenges that the students are incurring as they try to adapt to taking care of family situations as well as pursuing their educational outcomes. So with that said, I was wondering, these conditions are all very so dynamic, and I was hoping that you can share with us what are you actually learning in regard to your colleagues in regard to the students, and what are some of the best practices that are being developed that you'd like to share with the audience today? And if you wouldn't mind, I'll start with Rodney.
Sure. I think one of the big lessons that our team has learned is that we can't pretend to know what people want or need without asking them. So we've really kind of leveraged data and doing surveys to figure out, I can't design a PD or get PD for the teachers without asking the teachers, what are your prioritized needs? And can't try to shape programming for the students without asking the students what's going to work for you. And like, even again, Tiffany was dropping some powerful nuggets about family and the challenges for families. We can't push academic content nonstop if the families are just trying to be stable, right? So by doing the surveys, it's really helped us slow down and helped us be intentional about our support. And so one example that's born out of our surveys is the need to have parent education through virtual channels, not only with how to use the tools, but how to support their child, and even carving out some space for some self-care for parents, and giving them an opportunity to hear from other parents. And that was born out of the feedback from the parent survey, where parents were letting us know what they need. So I think I'm learning to slow down and to listen before mapping out, and trusting that it's going to be a moving target. So it'd be interesting to see if some of these practices that are bearing fruit, we can kind of transition it back when we go into our school days. It's like the ketchup's out of the bottle. You can't put it all back. So how do you take some of these good things, those learned lessons, when we go back to our traditional paths?
Thank you, Rodney. Excellent insights in regard to data and feedback, as well as learning to slow down and listen. Tiffany, would you mind sharing your thoughts in regard to what you have learned, as well as best practices?
Sure. So I think one of the things that Rodney said that resonated with me was this notion of failing forward. I've never used that term before, but I might start. That's exactly what it describes. Everything that I'm experiencing, what I know with my colleagues. We range in age, and therefore we range in, experiences. And for me, believe it or not, I'm a little more tech savvy than many of my colleagues. And I don't believe it because I don't even like computers. But at the end of the day, I figured out how to work things out. And so I realized that I had to step in and pick up to help certain teachers shift into this tech zone. I just went ahead and created emergency plans for them, a website, very brief, but grade level appropriate, so that their parents had access to something. And the teachers themselves felt like a sense of, I can do this. Some of us need a bit more of a, when you're young and you have to put your fingers together and give each other a boost, you guys know what I'm talking about. Some of us need a bit more of a boost than others. And so when your colleagues need a boost, that means their children need a boost, because the longer they struggle, the more their students are going to lack access. So our district is very small, and our tech support is 2 people. And they could not respond to the need as fast as, we could as colleagues. And so that's one thing that I realized, that in order to allow for other students to get access, some of us have to take on that work. The other thing, I just made a note, and it went, okay, there it is. the part about connecting with parents and helping parents, I found myself the first couple of weeks, really when I was having my meetings with my students, either virtual meetings or I set up small groups. And because I realized that having 28, 9-year-olds online at the same time is not effective. So that was the first learning moment that I had. And some teachers still don't get it because they have kids coming on in undies and, sleeping, it's wild. But,
Oh my
mama's
goodness.
walking in the room and grabbing them, wake up, it's kind of crazy. So I don't want that. For my students, I don't feel like it's effective use of our time. That being said, in those small groups, I found that I was pretty much tutoring parents and guiding them through the use of whatever programs that we have and they weren't familiar with because they didn't have to be. It happened during the school day. Now they're kind of taking on the facilitator role in some ways, and they want to understand what's going on. So I would either an older sibling I would explain it to, or I was finding myself just explaining, and it was happening with parents. So I had these little sessions with parents. Or older siblings. And then the other side was making sure that that structure that I was providing for parents, one, that they understood that it was optional. They could either tap into it if it was too much for them, they could modify it the way they wanted to. I was just giving them something. Again, that pressure, that understanding that the pressure that families are feeling, you have to feel it first, and I do feel it, but having that empathy and being in a place where you feel compassion on a regular basis for the people that you're working with. I see us as first responders, and we have to respond appropriately. And so when you say you give somebody a tool, a lot of times in certain communities, when the teacher says something, it's kind of like a must do, and this idea of, I have the option. I don't have, my day isn't working out. I don't have to feel the pressure to do this right now. I can respond to my need instead of respond to what the teacher told me I had to do for my child. Do you understand where I'm coming from with this?
Yes.
That is what I am trying. I've really been trying to send that message, and to provide them a structure within the day. So based on their emergency plan, where they have gaps and they don't have to check in with the kids, and the kids are taking on that role. Can you hear my baby? Okay, so I think I'm distracted now, so you all go ahead. Just a second.
Thank you, Tiffany. Excellent insights in regard to having empathy in terms of providing structure for the parents, but making it flexible for them to customize it for themselves, as well as speaking to the small group setting and also not being afraid to fail forward. With that said, I'd like to take it to another first responder. Michael, can you share your learnings as well as best practices as well?
Unmute, Mike.
There you go. Learning. Virtual formats and teaching and meeting. Learning there. But Wesley, I would say some of the main things that I've learned, one of the main things I've learned among many is that I love teaching. Like, you never know what you have till it's gone, the old saying. When we went to that schedule of having just the one virtual meeting per week with the students, I love Rodney's point about that being the main thing to keep kids connected. But last Thursday I had my meeting. It was supposed to be 9:20 to 9:40. It went to about, say, 10 o'clock with a bunch of kids who stuck around. And man, when that meeting ended, I broke down, man. I broke down like in tears. Like, I love this. I love doing this. I love facilitating kids in a discussion and hearing kids' opinions that are interesting on whatever the topic is. And just having that interchange between student to student, of course, is the best, the hardest to get in discussions. And it's great when that happens. So much of it is teacher, student, teacher, student. But when you have like Rodney said, that experience of connectedness in those virtual meetings, that's the emotional connection that kids and teachers have with one another, and you see how much you miss it in this environment, in this crisis. And when you have some of it, and you get a good interchange with kids and between kids, like we just had earlier today with that virtual town hall, it really hammers home just how much I love doing this. So that's one thing that I've learned, is that re-emphasized in this crisis situation, is that I really love this teaching game. Best practices, I would say a best practice, again, to Rodney's point about the survey result that came back, that the live meetings were so integral and so important to keeping kids engaged and keeping kids involved. I would say just trying to have those video chats include as much time as possible. As always with the Danielson teaching world, our goal is always to have less of us and more of them, where it's so hard for teachers, of course, because as a teacher, put me up in front of a room, I'll talk all day. It'll be great. I'm a talker. I can talk. I'm a teacher, so let me talk. But of course, as the Danielson rubric has always tried to emphasize, that it's about the kids talking. It's about the kids initiating questions. It's about the kids taking hold of the reins and taking ownership over their own learning. So in terms of best practice, I would say it will be in those video chats, trying to facilitate student questions as best as possible, and try to facilitate student interaction and have them talking more than me. Doesn't always happen, for sure. And I have my higher order thinking questions in my back pocket to spring out when there are the crickets in the discussion. But trying to look at a piece of text. We were just reading Warriors Don't Cry by Melba Patillo Beals before we left the building, doing a unit on the civil rights movement. So we would try to look at a key piece of the text, look at a key passage, and then try to have the kids bring up their questions, bring up what they notice, what's standing out to them in the text, and what questions they have about it, and trying to have their voices be prominent in those video chats, because that's really what's exciting to the kids. They've heard me speak plenty, and it's nice to hear Mr. Lamb speak some more on a video chat, but when they hear their peers, when they hear those voices coming from this apartment over here and that apartment over there, that's the true gold of those video chats, is to have them hear each other's voices and respond to each other's voices. So whether it's looking at a key passage from the book, or looking at a video clip, like say Eyes on the Prize video clip, or just yesterday we watched a clip from the Oprah episode in 1996, where the Little Rock Nine came together with some of their former white segregationist harassers. It's having the kids pretty much trying to follow that format of I notice, I wonder, has become a typical protocol in our school, both for adult meetings and for classes with students, and to have those kids voice what they notice in the text, whether it be video or written, and then have them share their wonderings, and then as a teacher try to prop those wonderings up and elevate those wonderings and make sure that each student's wondering gets its proper time for other students to respond to that student question.
Michael, that's awesome. Love the fact that you love teaching. Really really is motivating just to hear you have that passion. And hopefully all of us as a community can do more to support teachers on the front line. So excellent insights in regard to I Notice, I Wonder, trying to engage the student voice, and just creating that forum for the parents and the students to engage. So thank you. Xavier, what are some of the learnings as well as the best practices you are kind of observing at this time?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going around right now, and I love it. It makes me realize how much I miss being in the classroom, whether that's in person or virtually. And one of the advantages that Tiffany and Michael have, and I don't know, Rodney, if you were a classroom teacher as well, but at the K-12 level, you guys have received training on how to, like the things that you were talking about, higher order thinking, and some of the pedagogy things that community college teachers don't necessarily have that same background. You're a subject matter expert in your field, in your discipline, and it's up to you to go out and figure out what the best practices are. So early on, when I became a teacher, I wanted to just take my face-to-face class and quickly convert it to an online format. And as you guys know, it's not that easy. It's not plug and play like that. So I learned a couple tools along the way that have helped, that I'm continuing to share. And so one of them, which I don't know if you guys are using, you can give me a thumbs up if you are, I found that Flipgrid is a really powerful tool when it comes to sharing a student voice. And it's also very accessible because they have live captions. So it's pretty accurate. Microsoft recently acquired it about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and they've invested a lot of money into accessibility across all of their platforms. So that's a great one. And then the other one that I recently discovered, which is if you need to do a lecture, which in the online environment, it's not the best format. I mean, in the face-to-face format, it's not the best format. But Microsoft PowerPoint now has live captions as well if you do your update. So as you're speaking to a slide, the words literally will show up on the bottom of your slide, which is amazing, especially if you're doing it virtually, if you have students who are hard of hearing or just are second language learners. It just helps to be able to see the words as you're presenting an idea. As you can tell, I'm passionate about teaching. My skill set is at the community college level, and so there are a lot of resources. I mean, one of the things that faculty and professors like to do is to say, look, I have the answer to this problem, so you can go to any college and you'll find resources on how to convert your courses from face-to-face to online. I think the challenge for faculty at the community college level is they don't really know where to start, and it's almost paralyzing when it comes to all these resources coming your way, but you don't know where to just begin and take that first step. So one thing that I've created in response to that, and we'll have our kickoff meeting for business faculty in the community college system in the Bay Area, is what we're calling a community of practice. And we're having a kickoff where we're actually using facilitation tools to capture what their needs are. Just like Rodney mentioned, you got to know what the needs are before you try to address them. And then I'm responsible for creating templates within the Canvas learning management system. So we're actually creating a Canvas course as the community of practice where faculty can come in, they can share their best practices, they can share their ideas, even their content, their assessments, their lectures, whatever the best stuff they have, they can throw it in there, they can have discussions. And my hope is that as faculty begin to use that tool more and more, because it's free for all California community college faculty, they'll get more comfortable with it and be more inclined to use it as a teaching tool. So that's consuming a lot of my time right now. The great thing about it is it's a bit of a train the trainer. So I have colleagues who are in my same position, and I'm just getting started with giving them training. I'm also pretty good at this whole Zoom thing because I work remotely. So I've provided my training to my daughter's language immersion school, where I just do a Zoom training so that they can get comfortable using Zoom as teachers, because as you all know, it's much different being a moderator or facilitator in Zoom than it is being a participant or a listener. So just those little things have been helpful during this transition, and I continue to find I continue to look for opportunities to leverage my strengths and my skill sets to help the greater good.
So that last piece was great about that you have a community of practice, Xavier. Mike, Tiffany, Rodney, I know you have an immediate school community of practice. Do you have a larger community of practice? Or you have access to other folks who can give you some of these tools and resources? This is for anybody.
And I would say, I just want to add this, I would say mine was out of necessity because we have 28 community colleges in the Bay Area. That's a quarter of the community colleges in the state of California. And every single college in my region has a business department with at least 10 faculty in it. So if you do the numbers, if you can impact 10% of those faculty members, you talk about a snowball effect like what Tiffany was talking about. If you can help your colleagues, then it just helps the student at the end of the day. So providing that support system and finding the critical mass was, I thought, the best approach to helping my colleagues and the faculty in my area.
Yeah, I think it's been neat. I use this in my update to our teachers and principals this week, highlighting what we've seen the governors in the Pacific on the West Coast do, and then the Northeast governors do in terms of them huddling up. In essence, as a community of practice, I think we're all sharing the challenges and seeing ways in which people are kind of connecting in an intentional way has been great. So an example of that is every Thursday, Alameda County hosts an update call, superintendent, where all public charter school leaders, district leaders, and private schools are huddled up for updates, and the resources are shared across all the networks. It's sector agnostic. Because all of us are dealing with students and families and teachers. So having a common kind of aim has kind of bridged gaps that exist between sectors. So that's I think been really exciting. And again, it's like, well, what happens after, right? How do we keep these new community of practices that have found unity around a shared purpose, recognize that the shared purpose is always there, so I've been able to partner with some neighboring public schools in sharing resources in terms of what they're doing and what we're doing, and reciprocating that, and it's helping us grow, so that's exciting. But it was really neat to just see the governors kind of do that. Maybe some of it's for facade. Mike, I don't know. Cuomo's always on TV, so I don't know how much of it is it just Cuomo just being Cuomo? But it was kind of motivating to see these leaders, you know what? They're going to take away a little ego and just kind of, how can we work together to make this work?
Cool. So that kind of is a nice segue to how this is really going to change the way we do school moving forward, right? 5 months is a long time to be away from school, right? We're looking at potentially we're not going back to school until August, September of next year. And even after we do go back to school, depending on the nature as this virus, transforms, we might have to go back into a shelter in place in October or November. So this might be our new reality for the next year and a half or 2 years, where we're going to have interrupted time together. So what opportunities are there to reimagine learning? How do you all see pedagogy being transformed? What do you think school should look like moving forward if we can make this better? What are the things that you hope we do to make this better? And we're going to start with you, Tiffany.
So this is huge, but there is something that has been plaguing me in regards to holding these little class sessions that I'm holding and really getting my students, there's so much that the classroom management that you embody as a teacher is, it's almost magical. And I'm not saying that in a way where I'm boasting or whatever. You create magic, and it, like, the learning that happens, and it's something organic. I feel like that has been taken away from me. I don't have my fairy dust anymore. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to get it back. And so this is one example. I had a session, and mind you, all of my students know they can come into the session if they feel like they need to, but every child has their own specific day. It's in groups. And so I have about 6 students per day, and we'll have our discussions. I try to record a video or tell them to watch a video. So they already have something that we're going to discuss, or they had a lesson that they worked on in their Eureka Math book. Maybe it was a writing lesson, whatever it is, we already know what we're going to talk about. So they come to me and I'm like, okay, let's go. And they're looking at me like, hi, everybody's happy to be there. And then I have about 2 kids that are like ready to, okay, I have this, I did this, I did that. And then the others who sit back. And now in the classroom, I was able to push and encourage. And now that I don't have that connection, I mean, they know me, but they don't feel me. I don't know if you see where I'm coming from. So I'm like, how do I get this back? And so that's one thing I'm trying to figure out. The other thing I realized is I had told them, okay, I discovered the whole little chat. You can send the chat a little message. So I was like, okay, send me your answers. The first kid to send an answer, all the rest of the answers are exactly the same. I said, hey, did you guys think about this? Just because it's, they all sent the wrong answer. So it was like, okay, that's not going to work. So then I wanted to try show me. And they wrote on a piece of paper, but then I had to try to read backwards. So, and then, move it over. It's, so all of that, it just doesn't work. So I tried one other thing. Oh, now this is the next one I'm going to try. Thumbs up when you're ready, right? And then press the button. Everybody press it at the same time. So type it, but don't press the button. So now I'm trying to figure out all of these new classroom management tools. Do you see where I'm coming from? Where I didn't have, this stuff was second nature, and I promise I could walk in any classroom. We could have rocks and I can make something happen. But now I'm like, oh, this is hard. So speaking to that idea of having the peer share or the group conversation, I have a little visitor, the conversations happening and all that organic stuff. I forgot what your question was, but I'm stuck there.
Well, it's right. It's like, how to do magic in the classroom. You don't know how to do magic over Zoom, right? Posting assignments and posting videos and kids responding to assignments, that's not the same dynamism, because so much of learning is the social piece. Yeah. It is that collaborative piece. That's where the higher order thinking gets. Right. It's learning with your peers. And how do we do peer learning when it is still teacher directed, right? This is teacher to student. How do you get student to student interaction in a meaningful way? But we're at the beginning of this, but we got to figure this out. We're 1 month in.
Yeah, that's that part where I'm like, okay, if we can figure this out, it's going to make, I feel like that's the most bang for your buck outside of programs and whatnot, because most districts because most curriculum come with some form of a technology component. Not that every teacher uses it, but it's there. Now, if we can get, that side is kind of the easier side, getting teachers to actually use it, because we really need those technology components. So if you're able to quickly learn how to use those and then teach the students how to use, that's one part of it. But this conversation, evaluating each other's thinking, error analysis, all of that, that's the part where I'm like, I just can't Zoom it right now. So Yeah, that's what I think needs work.
Right. We do have to figure this out. We have a year of this, if not more. Mike, how do you think school is going to be changed? What do you hope you're able to develop over these next 6 months?
Well, that's a daunting prospect for sure. But I hope that I will become more conversant with different technological tools of teaching. I'm certainly becoming more conversant in terms of different ways to respond, in terms of talking about leaning on other teachers. I definitely lean on my colleague who I've always leaned on, Melissa Cohen, U.S. history teacher, who she knows a lot more about the technology tools than I do. So she has shown me, you can, this app or this website will help a kid it's not a kid write their response. A kid can make a video of themselves giving a response, and that's really cool. Or finding different of those technology tools that Tiffany is talking about. I certainly need to become more adept at using those for sure. So that's happening a little bit more every day. Just recently this week, rather than having that face-to-face magic like Tiffany is talking about, I definitely have been trying to send my messages more through PowerPoints that are more colorful and graphic and can make the message more enticing to teenagers. So where, like Tiffany said, where it used to be that face-to-face personal magic that I'm very familiar with, trying to create some of that magic through technology. I'm definitely, finding out how to use, Google Slides in better ways where I can make it more colorful and creative. It's funny, some of the things that have occurred, there's some students who have logged on now who used to be long-term absence kids. There's some students who engage every day who didn't used to engage every day, which is, curious. Like, so I guess for this one girl who never made it to, say, the second period class, now in this version of school, now she does come, and now she is, because it's right there. I don't know why the change, but for some, this method of teaching is working. So I wonder if we can talk to those kids more about why it's working for them. In order to try to make it better, as you said, over this long stretch. But to make it better over this long stretch, become better at these technological tools of making the content colorful and interesting and vibrant to the kids. I mean, a challenge in the building was often, oh man, we can't watch YouTube videos, because YouTube is, you can't log on to YouTube in the building because it's blocked. That's not a problem anymore. So sometimes now you can watch whatever video you want. You can watch whatever video you want to show. So finding ways to share your screen and make that something interesting, whether it's video or music or colorful designs to present the material in a fun and interesting way. I'm going to have to get better at those things.
I would even say, yes, you got to get better at the tools, but we have to rethink the curriculum, right? Just like you can't transfer 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. school day just online, we just can't say that the U.S. history content and this chronological order has got to be the same thing. Like, we have to create more freedom, flexibility, autonomy for young people to drive their own learning, right? That's something I hope comes from this. Xavier, we might be looking at the class of 2020 starting college online. All of these young people not going away to college, staying at home and starting classes online. The big problem is belongingness. What are universities? What are community colleges? How can they adapt and make sure that people show up in the fall? The last thing we want is for people to say, all right, I'm just waiting, right? How do we make this transition?
Gosh, that's a big question. You know, one of the passions of mine, and you guys have probably gotten a gist of this through this conversation, is I am a little bit more on the front end of trying to figure out how to humanize online teaching and learning. And there were snippets of this from Tiffany and from Mike when it comes to, like, I have this new challenge, how do I solve it? Like, that's the thing that gets me excited, and that's the thing that I actually want to go back and get a PhD in. So I have a lot of thoughts, and I've put I reflect a lot on this question, because when I was in the classroom, it was the question that I had. If I was teaching an online class, how do I make it more personal? And I'm just going to throw out a couple suggestions, and then I'll get to my point here. One of them is that I found to be really effective is just to kind of break down some of those silos of you're the teacher and they're the student, and give them a little glimpse of some of the challenges that you're having, so that it's more relatable. For example, if you're all pent up in your house and you go outside and do a quick 30 or 60-second video and share it with your students saying, man, I just really needed to get out of my house and get some fresh air and go for a walk because I was going crazy in the house, they would probably relate to that and feel more of that connection over video or during the next time you meet with them. So that's one example. As many personal videos without crossing the line, but as many, make it more personal, I think is the key to online education. And to answer your question, Alfredo, for the community college system, I anticipate this is counter recession. Whenever there's a recession, our doors are flooded and students will be coming back. And this summer will be a time for faculty to reflect and hopefully prepare. You know, they typically just do curriculum development over the summer, but I mean, this is going to be a steep learning curve this summer for those who have done the rapid response teaching and now need to really think about how to take what they've done in person and really have it be effective online, because we are going to have double the amount of students needing to retool, needing to reskill. And we have disciplines that have labs and that are much more challenging than business and entrepreneurship that really need to get a handle of this quickly. And I think it's possible. I think some of the things that you guys mentioned, the silver lining, is not every student learns the same way. And online teaching and learning can work for a major demographic. I mean, these kids are practically born with technology in their hands. I was amazed at how quick my daughter adjusted to Google Classroom and how to submit an assignment and how to use my printer remotely and all these things where it's just like, Jesus, when did you learn this? And I think that it's our responsibility as educators to embrace that and to just go for it and to be uncomfortable and to be like it was when you first stepped in that classroom and just be honest with your students and say, hey, I'm in this struggle with you guys. I'm figuring this out as we go, and we're going to learn this together, and ask them for feedback because I'm sure they have suggestions on how to make it better as well. So I won't go into the list of resources, but you
will share them with us, because we will share them with everyone. Sure. And
absolutely.
You are a fountain of knowledge. So
I'll be happy
to. Glad you're here. Rodney, the Lumen Christi Academies exists because you're in the process of doing a renaissance of Catholic education. You've embraced innovation. How is this pushing your network to go even faster and fail faster and really really drive the change that you want to see anyway?
I think it's twofold. One, it's about being comfortable being uncomfortable, and Xavier was touched upon that. And one of the pieces that in creating our network, these schools had existed as silos, you know, each working and operating independently of one another, and we've brought them together. So getting teachers to embrace a collaborative mindset was foreign for our context, and we've been using this kind of saying, strong today, stronger tomorrow, strongest together, as a kind of a unifying calling. And I think one of the things moving forward for us is really to see how much we've been able to accomplish because we're working together, right? And because we're willing to be iterative, because we're willing to create, because we're willing to think of the student at the forefront, and not just ourselves. I think when we come back and return to the school building, you can't go backwards. The kids aren't going to let you go backwards. You know, they know what a school day is like when learning doesn't revolve around the teacher all day. So how do you transplant them back in a setting where everything's teacher centered? You really can't. So I'm excited because our teachers have been put in a position to see that there are different ways to doing things. I think our parents have been put into a position where they appreciate the tremendous work that teachers do. So they're going to be, I think, a little more patient with the educational process. And so I think we can all go into it with new eyes. If you had to ask me what do my new eyes hope to see, I think truly empowering students to be learners who shape their path, learners who have choice, learners who create. We had a lot of pushback from some communities where, you know, we kind of like what Michael had shared is, you know, we went to the synchronous route first. Okay, let's try to leverage synchronous tools, and then we were trying to find that happy balance between asynchronous and synchronous, and then we got this PBL thing where for me PBL was 3 years out, right? First, we're doing blended learning, then we shift to personalized learning, and eventually we're really leveraging project-based learning where students can be creative and have that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Now, this whole situation says you don't have a 3-year timeline. You don't need to have a 3-year timeline. How can you do some of those things right now? So if kids are enjoying project-based learning now, how can we deprive them of that experience when we transition back into the school building next year? And to Tiffany's point, now we get to have the magic of teaching, the magic and gift of what teachers do in terms of bringing out the best of students. And then teachers can then also step away, right? And then allow the students to take ownership of their learning as well. So, you know, I think pivots are going to have to be made, and I think we're going to be more comfortable taking risks because we had to take risks. We're taking risks every day, right? And we're figuring it out. And I think people will figure it out as they continue to take risk when they go back.
Thank you, Rodney, for those insights. You've mentioned before, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, kind of expanding horizons. Tiffany, you shared some great insights as well, especially when it comes to trying to restore that magic. And I think that really aligns to what Michael said earlier in regard to having that passion for learning. It's really important that we all kind of figure out how can we ensure that teachers have that motivation, because if they are motivated, if they are engaged, if they feel they have that magic, then the students will feel it and they'll be productive. And then Xavier, in terms of highlighting those tools and sharing it with the platform, that will be excellent. As we're kind of getting close to the end here, I wanted it was important for us to ask, how do we collectively identify the gaps, and how do we support you as a community in regard to your efforts? It's not just the parents, not just the students, not just the teachers, but how can the community rally to you, and what are the resources you need to help you in those efforts? And if you wouldn't mind, I'll start with you, Michael.
Thank you, Wesley. I was just thinking a little more about what Alfredo had said about changing the curriculum as well, and thinking about how we can be supported in changing the curriculum. Our superintendent of District 7 in the Bronx, Michael Alkoff, he wrote a really nice letter out to all the teachers in District 7 when all this began, talking about how this can be an opportunity to really think outside of the box. I know a tired phrase, but in terms of changing your curriculum to address the coronavirus crisis, and how can you make connections between your curriculum and the crisis that we're all dealing with currently to help kids understand this crisis. Because as you guys have alluded to, certainly here in New York City, the crisis is front and center every day in their lives. And it kind of, like Alfredo said, it doesn't make sense to talk about anything else almost, and say, go back, oh, so today we're gonna learn about Joan of Arc doing such and such. No disrespect to Joan of Arc, but I certainly started to think about how can our curriculum connect to the crisis and what's going on, and how can we study what's going on with the pandemic in regards to our curriculum. And we started thinking, before we left the building, like I said, we were in the midst of our civil rights movement unit, reading Warriors Don't Cry, talking about the Little Rock Nine. And our main essential question was, has the civil rights movement improved life in America for people of color? And looking at that question and seeing, how much has changed because of the civil rights movement, how much hasn't changed and still needs to improve. So with that question in mind, certainly the certain crisis in 2020 is front and center in terms of how the crisis is hitting inner city communities of color the hardest, no doubt about it, especially in the South Bronx, where City Council member Richie Torres, who has contracted the virus, unfortunately, and is fighting through it, I think, pretty well, I hope, as he came out a couple weeks ago and said that people, though Manhattan, of course, has more people in the Bronx, people in the Bronx are twice as likely to die from COVID-19. So trying to think about our original question before we left the building, has the civil rights movement improved life in America for people of color? Let's continue to look at that question in terms of the current crisis, and how does that play in to what we were learning before we left the building. So I would say in terms of support, perhaps a good support would be ways to think about what are curriculum connections for math, science, social studies, English to the pandemic, and how can we tie what you were learning before we left the building to what's going on now. I mean, even just this morning, I put the little sign behind me here for our virtual town hall today with the students, and I was really, oh wait, I have to write backwards. So like Tiffany was talking about, oh, you have to read backwards, and I was thinking about, oh my gosh, wait, oh, some of the letters are symmetrical, so they are okay either way, and some are not. So I wanted to shout out my math teachers in thinking about symmetry and asymmetry in terms of, you know, how I'm thinking about that this morning in terms of this new style of teaching. So I would say in terms of support, how can we connect our traditional curriculum with the coronavirus crisis, I would say would be most helpful.
Thank you, Mike. And just to make sure, the sign says "Still the Village," right? Oh.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yes, still the village. That's what I was going for. I tried.
Right. No worries. It worked, and that's a positive message to put out there. It takes a human response for all of us to emerge well from this. Tiffany, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts in regard to some of the gaps you identified, and what are some of the resources and support you feel will be very helpful to supporting your efforts as well as others.
So this is a tough one because it's all tough, yeah. But the idea of changing the curriculum is what is standing out to me. And I'm gonna close it just 1 second. Okay. Having a 3-year-old moment. So that being said, this is what my classes are like also, just you guys are getting the real deal right now. So where was I? Changing the curriculum. Teachers have not historically been, I don't think people see us as entrepreneurs. And I think one of the pushbacks we may feel at this time in terms of shifting the curriculum, creating new curriculum, is that districts pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to consultants and curriculum development businesses, whatever, their institutions. Hundreds of thousands of dollars go towards that, but we can barely eat, you know? And so we're sitting here, we're the ones working with the students, we're revamping curriculum, we're making it work, but we don't get paid for it. And in California, the cost of living is so high, you know, I'll never be able to purchase a home, not on a teacher salary. So at the end of the day, it's, well, you want us to do all of this work. We have all of this education under our belts, but we are not valued. And that is one, we're exploited in a way that is, we're taking care of other people's children. We're taking care of, I don't know how many children have passed through my hands over the past 15 years. And not only am I teaching them, I'm caring for them. And so I feel as though, this is gonna sound harsh, but I feel like the public education system is seen as another form of babysitting. And the learning is a part of it, but it's secondary to, you just are in a space. You're a warm body, taking a space, taking care of these kids during this time so that this capitalistic society can continue to run. And at the end of the day, now this COVID-19 situation has made everybody see education in a different light. But I think the attitude of society needs to shift, where we are honoring teachers and what they are bringing to the table on a daily basis. So if you have teachers revamping curriculum, you should look at them as if how you look at a consultant. Consultants walk into schools and, you know, they're glorified. Oh, you're the next best thing. You're the next thing walking out the door. That's what I see as a 15-year vet. And I've seen people come in and go out left and right. You know, it's a revolving door of, I have the answer, but those answers don't work. The people who make it work, or make whatever little nugget you might drop work, are the people that are in those classrooms. And so I really just think that the mindset of the community at large needs to shift. And when you look at a teacher, you look at an entrepreneur, you see a person who is, one, making it happen, and not just we're a different type of entrepreneur in that we're selfless in the most part, and we do things and we collaborate. That word collaborate has been used very, in a very manipulative way in my eyes, because it's, oh, well, if you're not a team player, if you're not collaborating, you're not a team player. You're not looking out for the child's best interest. But my child has to pay I pay $1,600 for my child to go to daycare. So I need my child to be able to eat as well. I need to have a roof over her head. So at the end of the day, I think just that mindset, empowering not only students, but empowering teachers, in that we are the ones that are making this work. How are districts responding? How is the federal government responding to the work that teachers are doing? And not just seeing it as, well, this is here's a bucket of knowledge. A bucket of knowledge in any other industry, you're getting paid for that bucket of knowledge. If I was in Google's think tank, I would be getting paid to drop my nuggets. So I think that needs to shift as well. Outside of this, yes, we need to respond to this moment. And I'm not saying that anybody should go back and, not share, we need to teach sharing. But what I'm saying is, beyond this moment, we need to start shifting the way that we see teachers and see them in a different light, and honor the work that they do and compensate them for the work that they are sharing in these collaborative moments of greatness. That's all I'm saying.
Hear, hear.
Tiffany, you said that beautifully. I think the world needs to hear that. The community needs to hear that. We need to get behind our private sector as well as our government sector to make changes in that regard. And hearing it from a teacher was very, very powerful. So thank you for sharing that. Rodney, I know we're kind of winding down time. I'd like to get yourself as well as Xavier, your thoughts in regard to some of the gaps and some of the support that you need from the community.
Tiffany had that mic drop moment. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's powerful. I think in terms of gaps, different people reference the kids who are off the grid during this time. And when you think of achievement gaps that exist in our schools, regardless of the sector, the 7 schools that I support, 4 of them serve 80 to 90% free and reduced lunch families from lower SES. When I think of the support that some of our families are able to provide kids in that context versus, say, the support that someone, using Oakland as an example, someone in the hills are able to provide their kids, and just kind of think, what does 5 months of that disparity in support look like, and then how does that impact learning? I think that as a country, in the same way that we're going to be looking at, I think we should be looking at what Tiffany said, is this honoring the teacher and honoring the work that the teachers do. I think we also have to look at with a critical eye to what is going to happen to an already inexcusable achievement gap that exists, that's only going to widen in the midst of this pandemic. So I think bringing light to it, and then really kind of figuring out, okay, where are the bright spots? Where are the places where communities, schools, districts manage to stem that gap, or where student achievement increased, to then be able to share those best practices, so that we can make sure that there's equity and opportunity. So I'll stop there.
Well, the conversation is just getting started. I love the comments that Tiffany shared. I think that all of the above, it's challenging at all levels of public education. It goes all the way up, and it starts at the preschool level all the way up to the 4-year university level. And I think the silver lining in this whole situation is that we do need to rethink how we educate, and we do need to rethink the value that we put on educators at all levels, because it's not right. And I think that there are things that are inherently, I take a more controversial stance on it, where I think technology can fill some of those gaps if there are some foundational things that are provided. And I think Tiffany spoke to it very eloquently by saying the support system, like the way that we treat teachers right now, it's more like a babysitter as opposed to them really being able to take the most critical information and teach those students and empower them. And yet there are things that I feel like are just busy work in the classroom. Like I'll use typing, for example. My daughter's, self-learning typing as a fun thing to do with her 7-year-old friends, because it's one of the few things that we allow her to do on the internet. And that's something that's taught in the classroom, and it shouldn't be. I mean, it should be something that if students are given the basics, and of course, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which goes into a whole other thing. But if we can get students high-speed internet, if we can get them a computer that is a good computer, and if they have that support system, which is the most critical point of it all, then they can learn at their own pace, and we can leverage technology like we do in other industries for those mundane things, and then we can leverage teachers for the things that are most important, like critical thinking and those things that really differentiate our students so that they can be global leaders. But I'm going to stop there. This is the last thing I'll say. This book here is a great book. It's called Creative Confidence, if you haven't read it. Rodney mentioned a couple things. It's all about design thinking. It's an awesome book to make you rethink all systems, and it's all about innovation, and it can be applied to any situation, any industry. So I recommend taking a peek at that. And it's from Stanford, but it really does unleash your potential if you put the practices to use. So
Xavier, can you give us the title again?
Creative Confidence. It's in the chat. I saw someone drop it in there, and I think it's backwards too.
Yeah. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Really appreciate all of you for joining us today, dropping so much knowledge, so many incredible nuggets. All of the resources that you've mentioned, or even the resources that you have not mentioned, we're going to gather them up, and we'll find a way to share it out, not just with those of us like right here on the panel, but we're going to push it out to any folks in the community. We have different avenues to push that out. This is part of a community forum series, and we started this because we know that people need connection and that we're better together. And everything that you all shared, I mean, we have so much potential just in this small community. Imagine if we were able to grow this. Last week, we were talking about the digital divide. There are things that are going to come out of that. Next week, we're talking about responsive philanthropy. On May 1st, the following Friday, we'll be talking about supporting Main Street and entrepreneurs. We have Julie Close, the Northern California District Director of the Small Business Association, joining us. Then we're going to hit the class of 2020. We're going to hear some student perspectives, graduating seniors, what's happening to them, graduating high school students, what are they looking at, and some different folks at higher ed and in academic counseling. And then on Friday, May 15th, we're looking at putting America to work. We got 22 million people who just filed for unemployment. What are the innovative ways that we can get people back to work? This is a weekly conversation. We're trying something. We don't know where it's going to go. We're going to try and turn a Zoom into a podcast. We got to see what the quality of the audio is, but you all are so knowledgeable. You're such heroes, and we really, really, really appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing every day, and let's stay connected, and let's come back stronger.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone. Wonderful weekend.
True.
Stay safe, stay well.
Here.